Hey, welcome back to my channel. This is a workshop that's designed for anyone who struggles to say no. Women and historically marginalized folks often identify as people pleasers who say yes way too much. Saying no often comes with feelings of guilt and shame about letting people down. If that sounds like you, give this a thumbs up so that it finds its way to other people's home screens. Now, in this video, I'm going to be talking about where that guilt comes from and how you can manage it. I'll also offer you a tool that I use all the time that can help you practice radical self-respect and say no more often. Now, there's a free workbook that goes along with this workshop. You can find the link to that in the show notes below. If you have any questions or comments while you're watching the video, make sure you put them in the comments below, and I promise I will be responding. With that, welcome to Ditch the Guilt. Hello, and welcome to your workshop. In this workshop, you're going to learn how to take some practical steps to start ditching your guilt and saying no more often. Learning to negotiate effectively does not happen overnight, but learning how to say no without guilt is one of the best steps that you can take to lay the groundwork for a healthy life that includes negotiation as part of your everyday skills. During this session, we're going to cover a lot. Spend some time introducing the topic and give you a bit of a reality check. Not that you probably need it, but I'll talk about what women today are struggling with and give you an opportunity to reflect on how that resonates with you. We'll talk about gratitude, including its benefits, but also its dark side. And then we'll dive into the power and complexity of guilt. I want you to walk away with some practical tools that you can start using right now to find more time and breathing space in your life. So if you don't yet have a piece of paper and pen in front of you, or you haven't downloaded the workbook, make sure you do that right now. So my name is Joanne Zook. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm known for growing leaders and changing cultures. For 2 decades, I've been coaching and mentoring women to help them use their empathy as a superpower within their jobs, at home, and really importantly, in being compassionate toward themselves. My career has been primarily in the public sector, where I've developed and led both small and expansive transformation projects. I value leadership, diversity, and creativity, and lead with these values every day. My business is focused on helping women negotiate for exactly what they want and what they deserve in their work and in their life. I've been told that one of my gifts is making people feel seen, and another is creating space for others to thrive. Creating space means taking up space yourself, and it starts with taking up space yourself. But I want to confess to you that I haven't always been comfortable taking up space. About 5 years ago, I began working in this beautiful building. This is the Manitoba Legislative Building. I wasn't an elected official or part of the political side of government. Instead, I was responsible for developing and implementing a strategy to build an innovative culture within the public service. But I'll tell you something, from day one in that building, I felt like an imposter. This is what I walked into every day: limestone, Italian marble, and bronze statues as far as the eye could see. But this was a building that was built for men. And as a woman, I always felt like I wasn't enough. The stairs were just a little bit too high. The floors were polished to a sheen. You could see reflections in the floors. And that meant that those heels that I wore to feel strong and confident slipped around like crazy. The women's restrooms, clearly an afterthought in this building, were located at the far end of the building, but only in the basement and on the third floor. And the furniture, my goodness. In 4 years that I worked in this building, my feet never touched the ground in a meeting. The boardroom tables came up to my armpits, and the chairs, of course, were built for 6 foot tall men. So my feet swung beneath me like a little kid who was taken to a fancy restaurant with her parents. Literally every day I walked into this building and walked up that grand staircase, heard my heels clicking on the marble, and thought, wow, I can't believe they let me work here. My second thought, I wonder when they're going to find out that I'm a fraud. I spent a long time in that building playing the part of someone who belonged. And it's funny, it really wasn't until I left that my thinking shifted. Now, when I go there, my thoughts are very different. I think, wow, I did a lot of amazing work from that building, and they were lucky to have me. I really wish I had understood that while I was working there, because I think it would have changed how I worked. I don't know if this resonates with you, but I think as women, we share this in common. We rarely think, holy, think about and look at how much I've done in my life and how proud I should be of my work. Instead, we always focus on everything that still needs to be done. We push ourselves, we fill all of the gaps, we strive for perfection, and we give props to the people around us. We say things like, "Oh, but I've had a great team," or "I was in the right place at the right time." We do this across all of our lives. We rarely take credit for our own work, and we are always focused on filling the gaps and simply doing more. And we're doing this at work, we're doing this in our families, with our friends, our extended family, in our communities, and in our volunteer roles. I'm sure you've heard it that the reward for good work is more work. And I feel like that's the experience of women everywhere. And I probably don't need to tell you that the pandemic just made it worse. Beginning of October 2021, McKinsey and Company, which is an international consulting firm, released a report called Women in the Workplace 2021. So it looked at the impact of the pandemic on women's careers. And as you can probably guess, it was not a positive report. What they found was that 1 in 3 women have considered taking a step back or away from the workforce in the last year. Now, this is an American study, and so the impacts are slightly different here in Canada. But the social effects of the pandemic, they're consistent across North America. Schools were canceled, elder care reduced, and the burden of unpaid labor, yeah, it fell squarely on the shoulders of women. Now, in Canada, we're starting to see employment rates rise back to the levels that they were pre pandemic, but women are no longer earning as much. They're reducing their hours or they're stepping down in their careers, taking demotions to positions where they can better balance the loads on their plates. And this is going to have impacts on our economy for decades. As women step back from leadership roles, private companies become less profitable. Public sector programs become less inclusive and less effective. And voluntary organizations, they become strained to provide the services needed by our most vulnerable populations. And as for economy, well, I read recently that women spend 90% of their disposable income within their communities. Men, less than 40. I don't know about you, but I'd like to live in a society where women are at the table making important decisions, where they're influencing public policy and bringing compassion to vulnerable people, and where our communities are thriving centers of connection and support. If 1 in 3 women are considering downshifting their careers, what's happening to the other 2/3? Well, they're barely holding it together. And that's because many of us are working in organizations that have been designed around the needs of 1950s men. Heteronormalization aside, this means that women have had to operate under a set of rules that were simply not created for us to be successful. And we have done our best to pretend that we belong, but it's a struggle. It has meant that working mothers are treated as both heroes and villains. And women without children feel as though they should be working twice as hard because, of course, they don't have that second job at home. None of this, none of these expectations were realistic or sustainable before the pandemic. But over the last 18 months, it has only gotten more intense. It's only gotten worse. We pretend because we're socialized to, we pretend to have an unshakable positivity and an eagerness to take on whatever it is that our boss asks us to do, whether it's another huge project or organizing another farewell party, we always say yes. And we pretend that we don't need help because for some reason we've been socialized to believe that asking for help demonstrates weakness. And so we work longer hours, we spend more time on work that's neither strategic nor a good use of our time. As colleagues are disengaging from the workplace, we're finding that more projects are landing on our shoulders. The work isn't going away. And in our continual drive to constantly prove our worth, we are producing more and more miraculous outcomes because we're working more and more hours each and every day. And then when we get home, of course, the second shift has become unpredictable and at times volatile. Our parents are struggling, our kids are struggling. Life takes more time and more energy. And as we do, we are filling gaps wherever we go. Like that spray foam insulation that you can buy at the hardware store, women expand into the cracks and crevices of work and of life. We hold everything together, and we do this by managing an incredible volume of information in our heads. Like a news ticker on a cable network, most women have a constant stream of information and reminders and decisions that they need to make running through their brains. And in amongst these are reminders of how we're failing at life and being colleagues and being parents. There's a lot going on, and we can't talk about self-worth at length in this workshop because that's more than we can do in a 40-minute workshop. One thing we can talk about is that news ticker in your brain. Your brain is an incredible piece of real estate. It's the center of your cognitive ability. It controls motor function and emotional response, and it retains all of your memories, including how your mom used to smell when you were a kid and the lyrics to that obscure song that you haven't heard for 20 years. What your brain doesn't do well is simultaneously storing and processing information. And that's what our ticker is constantly asking us to do, to constantly take in new information, reprioritize, make decisions, and remember the 100 other little things that we need to do today. So I want you to pull out your piece of paper or your workbook and writing. Start writing all of the things that right now are on your to-do list. So things that are popping in your brain for today, this week, this month, even this year. What's on your list of things that you need to get done? So I'd suggest that you pause this video and set a timer for 4 or 5 minutes, and number your lines for the fun of it. See how many you get. So I did this exercise and I just gave myself 2 minutes. And in 2 minutes, I came up with 15 items, and they varied from everything from booking a meeting at work to sending reminders to my daughters about a family dinner to booking a carpenter to put up some new walls in our house. I found that it felt great to get those things out of my head. But honestly, it just left me feeling like I needed to spend another 20 minutes listing all of the other things that needed to be on that list. It was kind of depressing because there were a lot of things on that list. So I'm going to ask you to put the list away for a minute as we shift over and talk about gratitude, but we will come back to this list. So don't throw it in the garbage out of frustration. I want to turn next to gratitude because I know many women have adopted a gratitude practice. Certainly in the last couple of years, we've heard about the impact of gratitude on our mental health. And so maybe you're already practicing gratitude. Maybe you're combining it with a daily prioritization exercise. And that's a terrific idea, so long as it's helping you to feel empowered and confident. So let's talk about that. For many years now, psychologists have talked about positive effects of gratitude on our mental health. And again, I would urge you, if you haven't given it a try, give it a try each day, each morning, or if you're in a mood, sit down and write down 3 things that you're grateful for and why. What impact are those experiences or those attributes having on your life? Reflecting on what we're grateful for helps us in a number of different ways. It can help us really see through the fog of where we are now toward the future. So it helps us recognize what we do have. It helps us reflect on tremendous gifts and talents that we have, acknowledge ourselves, what we've accomplished, and be proud of those achievements. It can help us recognize and appreciate our privilege and to cultivate positive emotions, even when we are not in a great mood. For me, I find that my gratitude practice really helps me to see beauty and opportunity, even in really difficult situations. Gratitude can also, unfortunately, fuel counterproductive thoughts and feelings if you're not careful. And that happens when we use gratitude as a reason to stay small. We say things like, I I'm so grateful for all of these things. And so I should be happy with what I have. I should be satisfied with what I have. I'm grateful for everything that I've accomplished in my life. So I should use my gifts to do more or help more. I'm not doing enough. Or I have so much. I shouldn't want more. I shouldn't want better. Should is the shadow side of gratitude. Gratitude should never make you feel unworthy of more. Gratitude should never prompt you to apply the lens of should to your life. Because should is not a nice word. It's that thing that that family member, that one that you avoid. It's the thing that they always tell you, whether it's about work or home or family. You should spend more time with your mother. You should focus more on your career. Should is never nice. It is used to create obligation and duty. It's used to correct your actions, and it's used to criticize you. And the worst offender of using should on you is you. So much of this comes from a distorted sense of how the world works. Did you know that 60% of women will never negotiate for their salary? Like never, not once in their lives, because they feel like they should be grateful for the job. One of the most common things I hear as a negotiation coach, I feel like I should prove myself and then I'll ask for the higher salary. Except it never happens, because as long as we work without an actual definition of what success means, we never feel like we've proven ourselves. And so our male colleagues at the same level are making on average 30% more than us. And that gap gets wider the longer that we are in our careers. That's why gratitude is one of the 7 deadly sins of negotiation. We talk about these at length in my negotiation program, but I want you to know that gratitude and likability or people pleasing are the biggest hurdles that women typically face. At first glance, these attributes can seem really positive, but in negotiation, whether with our families or colleagues and bosses or people in our communities, the way that we've been socialized as women make these significant liabilities. They prevent us from negotiating. They hold us back from negotiating effectively. And that's because we're taught to focus on what we should be doing instead of what we value. For most of us, it starts right here. This is me, a very sweet little girl, probably around 4 years old, with my Baba and my Jaju, grandma and grandpa, and my little brother. When I see this picture, of course, I see so much. I'm looking at the furniture, I'm looking at you, Grandpa, with your disco shirt. But I also see that that I am already being socialized to be the perfect little girl here. So this isn't Christmas, because you'd see tinsel coming out of every corner of this house. This is a Saturday. This isn't like a particularly fancy day. My grandparents aren't dressed up any way differently than they would normally. But you'll notice that I'm wearing a dress. I grew up on a farm. This is a farm. This is a cattle farm. And there is never a circumstance where wearing a pink and white dress with white stockings is appropriate attire on a cattle farm. I also see that I have my legs crossed because, of course, that's what proper little girls do. We behave, we're polite. Even though our stockings I'm sure these were made of wool, and we want to go run around in the mud, we sit like a pretty little girl. We don't cause a scene. We don't make people uncomfortable. We don't ask for a second piece of cake. We wait to be noticed because children should be seen and not heard. And we try very hard to be liked. As little girls, we learn that life exists on a binary in black and white. You're either a good girl or you're not. There's no such thing as an adequate girl. The goal is always excellence. And so we learn to be grateful, humble, likable, generous, because of course we don't want to not be those things. We learn to be patient and hardworking, because otherwise we can't succeed. And importantly, we learn that we have to earn our way in the world. We have to prove our worthiness. We learn that we do not automatically deserve anything. Deserving comes from doing. And so we come to believe that we have to do things in a certain way before we can have what we want, and most certainly before we can feel worthy. At work, we learn that we have to demonstrate that we're superheroes so that we can have the title or the salary, or even just call ourselves successful. I think we need to flip that script. I want to give credit to Maureen Murdoch, a psychologist who first wrote about the heroine's journey of self-discovery. Aside from the voice that tells us what we should be doing, there is nothing in this world that stops us from being in alignment with our values, from being confident, successful, and worthy today. Because when we act from a place of confidence, we do things differently. And I'm going to tell you, a big part of that, big outcome of doing things differently, is not doing quite so much. What do you value in life, and how can you use that to assess how you spend your time? Here's another picture of my Baba living her best life. She was a hardworking woman who had a very difficult husband. He was always grumpy. He wanted things his own way. But she stood her ground with him and the rest of our family. And he had 14 siblings. So there was a lot of family to set boundaries with. She grew up in a different time than I did, but there are many things that I appreciate about her and how she led in negotiation. Perhaps her best lesson to me was her belief and her knowledge. She didn't have to prove herself to anyone to be deserving. She only needed to uphold her own values. So pull out those worksheets again and turn to page 2 and spend 10, 15 minutes, maybe journaling or drawing, until you can come down to a set of 3 or 4 statements that isolate these questions. What do you value most? What do you want more of in your life? What legacy do you want to leave with the ones you love? How do you want to be remembered? So again, take 15 minutes, journal, think about that, and then get it down to 3 to 4 values or priorities that you want to be defined by. Now that you've done that exercise, go back to that first page, go back to your list. You might have already done this when you had paused the video, but take another look at that list and start to assess the items there. How many of the items on that list are musts and how many are shoulds? And then when you apply your values, how many are actually aligned to who you are? When I did the exercise, I came up with 15 items in 2 minutes. 4 of them were musts I had to do, and 3 of them were just tasks. So 3 of the 4 weren't really important. I actually had to do them. Only one of the items on my list of 15 was aligned to me. And here's the most important part. In the past, I would have done that one last. That one thing that was most aligned to my values, my hopes, my wishes. But now the aligned ones are the first ones that I do because they help me to live my values every day. And that helps me to start every day by feeling worthy. But aligning to your values means that you need to say no more often. Because on my list of 15 things, there were 4 things that I had to do, and only one of them was really aligned to what was important to me. That leaves 11 things that either don't get done or need to find another home. So if you struggle with saying no, you might find this flow chart helpful. So there is a copy of this in your workbook. And you always start at the top here with each item. Does it align to your values? If yes, is it something you can do today? If yes, then do it, prioritize it, build some time in your day to manage that. If you can't do it, then schedule it. You might need to break it up into 2 parts, 3 parts, 5 parts, get it into your calendar and make sure it's a priority on each of the days that you work on it. Now, if we go back up here and it doesn't align to your values, if it's a no, the next question you ask is it important? Is it still important to do? If that's a yes, then go to the question of, do you have to do it? Are you the one that needs to do that activity? And if yes, then put it in your schedule. Maybe it's something you do today, maybe it's not. But put it in your calendar. And if it's not a yes, if you don't have to do it, then delegate it. And of course, going back here, if it's not an important task, then absolutely drop it. There are things that simply do not have to be done. I said earlier in the presentation that saying no more often is the first step to negotiating effectively. It's actually kind of like a gateway drug to negotiating effectively. It makes you feel really powerful. Practicing saying no to things that don't align to your values helps you to recognize something really important. And it's the difference between true guilt and socialized guilt. So it's the difference between true guilt, which is feeling badly for failing at something that actually matters, and socialized guilt, which is the feeling we get when we apply the lens of should to the task at hand. So when we think we should do something and we don't do it, that's socialized guilt. So I want you to practice saying no, and I want you to start in the easy places in your life. So where you volunteer, at your kids' school, not with your best friends, not in the workplace, not with your family. When school fundraising committee asks you to sell 30 boxes of cookies, that's a great place to practice no. So you say, no, I can't take that on. Rule here is the simpler you can go, the better. The more you can practice using a simple no, the better. So if you can say, that's a no for me, I have to say no, or I can't take that on, that's perfect. You don't owe people an explanation for something that's a simple ask. So practice using your simple no's. If you feel that you need to provide some context or provide kindness, then for sure, these are really great ways to lead in. Thanks for thinking of me, but it's a no. Sounds great, but I have to say no. If and only if you know somebody who would like that opportunity, you can certainly say that you might reach out to this person, or I could connect you to this person. I want to give you bonus points if you actually only say that you're sorry when you are actually sorry. Reserve that for the times that matter. Reserve that for true guilt. So once you've mastered simple art of the simple no with kindness, with people that you aren't really tight with, that's when you can start practicing saying no to unimportant things at work or at home. So, can you organize this farewell party? It's a no for me. I can't take that on. These are great ways to start practicing no for things that are really not going to be career breakers, but are important in terms of finding yourself some space and time. Because no is just the beginning, and learning how to say no and shed the guilt because it's not aligned with your values. Remember, this opens the door to a huge world of everyday negotiation where you can use this skill in every conversation that you have. And the ultimate here is when your boss comes by your desk again and says, "Hey, I have this huge project and you're perfect for it." And normally you would jump and say, "Yes, of course, I'd love to take that on." Instead, you go through a conversation with your boss. You ask lots of questions. You get a sense of what the workload's like. You get a sense of what resources will be in place to support you. And you end the conversation not with a, "Oh, yes, I'm so happy to take that on," but, "Hey, that sounds really exciting. And I'd like the opportunity to think about this overnight. I want to be a part of it, but can we talk tomorrow about what it's going to mean for my workload and what might be able to come off my workload?" So it opens the door. No is really, like I said, the gateway drug to more effective negotiation. And it opens the door to collaborative negotiation that allows both you and the person that you're negotiating with to get to an agreeable outcome in a way that you both feel valued.
Okay, so thank you for watching. Now, before you leave, make sure you like this video and in the comments, tell me what you're going to say no to next. If you want to build from here, then make sure you're subscribed to my channel and check out all of my free negotiation courses that I've built for people just like you. See you next time.